Hey y'all, Kenny here with my Thompson Center Encore accuracy tip number 2. Thanks for joining me. Today I want to talk about some of the issues that you may run into when you mount a scope on your Encore. Of course, the Encore is different than the bolt action in that the scope is mounted on the barrel and not the receiver. The first thing that you'll notice is that only about half of your base is in contact with the barrel. As you get in front of the chamber and the barrel begins to taper, the base is suspended over the barrel, and that can allow the scope to flex, and that can cause vertical strings in your groups. Let me show you an extreme example of that. This is my 30-06 barrel when I first got it. I mounted a Burris Veracity scope on that barrel. That scope weighs about 1.5 pounds. I mounted it on an aluminum weaver style base. And you see I got about a 6-inch string. Now about 2/3 of that string was caused by the scope flexing. So I ordered a Warne steel base for the 30-06 and the Burris scope, and while I was waiting on that to arrive, I mounted this Nikon scope on my 30-06, and this is not the 30-06 barrel, this is the 44 Magnum. But I used an extra ring back here at the rear, and that did eliminate the vertical string. So that's a good way to just check a rifle out, is to add that ring, and it makes a pretty solid mounting system. But my go-to now is to bed my bases to the barrel. I use JB weld to do that. Now that may not be necessary if you're using steel mounts like the Warne or Leupold, or if you're using a one-piece design like the Tally, but I still do it because I just like the idea of having that full contact with the barrel, and I think it maybe helps reduce the stress on these screws back here. I'll tell you, if you have a large scope, a heavy scope, and a heavy recoiling rifle, it really punishes this scope mount system. So it's critical to get a good scope mount on the rifle. I want to advise against putting a cheap scope on your Encore. Now, I'm not saying you need a $1,000 scope, but stay away from those $100 jobs. They'll die hard and fast on this rifle. I am of the opinion that the Encore or any break action rifle is a bit harder on a scope than bolt action is, and I don't have any evidence to back this up, but I think it is because of the closing of the action. Quite a bit of shock goes into that scope each time you close the breech, depending on how hard you do that. So take my advice, it will save you a lot of frustration and wasted ammunition to put a good scope on your Encore. I'll give you the Kenny D guarantee on that tip. So here's a close-up of a bedded base. I use JB weld to do that, and it blends in nicely with this stainless barrel and the silver base. On the 44 mag with the black base, I just used a permanent marker to color it, and it blends right in as well. Now I just gave you a lecture on cheap scopes, and you see I have this conus shot on this rifle, but there's an explanation. I had a P223 on this gun, and it died, and I just haven't had time to take it apart and repair it. I didn't buy this scope. It came as one of those CVA combos, and you couldn't hit a bull in the behind with this at 100 yards. So I tore it down and bulletproofed it. I, by the way, have a whole playlist of scope repair videos. If you get a chance, visit my channel and check that out. This is the base off the 30-06. It's the first base I ever bedded. You begin by roughing up the surface with some sandpaper to ensure good adhesion. Then apply the epoxy, JB weld in this case. Then you use some release agent on your barrel. I use Johnson paste wax, and load your screws up with release agent as well. Then torque this down on the barrel. You can use a rag with some acetone or lacquer thinner to clean the squeeze up very carefully. Then allow it to dry overnight. Take the base back off the barrel Then I make a shim out of aluminum foil, goes up here on the front. That is about 2/1000 thick, and it preloads this base. Keeps the front of it under tension. I use the permanent thread locker along the length of the base and on both sides of the shim. Again, some release agent on the barrel. Permanent thread locker on the screws this time, and I torque those down. You have a base on your Encore now that will not move. I give you the Kennedy guarantee on that. That about does it for tip number 2. For tip number 3, I will address headspace, what it is, how to measure it without any fancy specialty tools, and how to adjust for it. So be sure to subscribe so you'll get a notification. Thanks again for watching.